and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 172. If it looks slightly different here, then it is. I've sort of been having a slight change of layout. I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the moment. But if you happen to be watching live, then say hello, leave a comment, tell me what the weather's like, leave your name if you haven't been here before. And in the meanwhile, make sure you click subscribe, like, and all that kind of thing. And let's make a start. So yes, welcome to episode 172. Today we're going to be doing it's a feedback session. So I've had two different people send in, Doriana has sent in an image for a bit of feedback, and Sandra has sent in a few images, and it's more of a kind of conceptual idea as much as a feedback on an individual image. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. Also, I've decided to set up a challenge for next week, short notice perhaps, but part of the whole kind of strange system of me only really kind of half being back here, and memory not working completely. Yes, the strange, if you're noticing a slightly different layout, and you might also notice my eyes moving in different directions to where they normally do. Essentially, you may remember I talked about having a standing desk set up. Well, a friend has lent me a treadmill with the idea that when you're standing up, you can be using a treadmill and getting fit at the same time. So all this is in the vague hope of trying to combat the sciatica that's been plaguing me for the last 3 months. Having said that, to fit the treadmill in has required shifting the desk forward and out, and suddenly the camera isn't in quite the same space and what have you. So everything's just slightly odd. And what this also means is that whereas I usually have my main screen to the front and my kind of bit which is telling me all the technical stuff I need to do off to my left, that is now all off to my right. So I'm going to be keeping glancing in slightly the wrong direction, so please bear with me. Meanwhile, yes, let's see, I've got a few comments in already. So Robert says, howdy all from Texas, rainy and chilly. April says, greetings from Long Island, New York. Pat says, sunny but chilly here in Somerset. Doriana joins us and says, good morning, sunny with snow from a small town in northern Ontario, Canada. Sandra says, hi everyone from a sunny and mild Birmingham. April says she forgot about the time difference, so we'll only be on for a little bit today. Yes, of course, that is part of the problem here, is that the clocks have gone back here in the UK last night. So I don't know whether there's a sort of what the time shift is in North America, or whether daylight savings time, whether you've already had it, whether you're going to have it. But I do have a funny feeling that they don't line up, so that there's 1 or 2 weeks where maybe I'm an hour early or an hour later than you're used to. Maggie says damp and she goes damp and autumnal here. Susan says hi from a rather grey and dull Kakubri. John says hello from a mid-Ohio on a wet Sunday. And yes, Susan and Maggie are chatting about the glorious autumn colours that we have. Doriana says we turn back our time on November the 1st. And April says I'm an hour later there. Oh, and Nadia's joined us from a wet Fife. So yeah, pretty damp round most people currently watching in. Apart from, Sandra's got sun down in Birmingham, and Doriana's got sun with the snow in Canada. And Pat says hi all. Great. So we have people. We have. Yes, sorry, I'm getting confused again on which screen I'm supposed to be looking. We have people, we have pictures, we have ideas to be getting on with. So let's make a start. So what I'm going to be dealing with first of all, if I can remember which screen I'm supposed to pull things up and then I don't hit the wrong button first, is Doriana. Doriana sent in an image. So let me try and find that and pull that up on screen now. If I'm fortunate and I do that, then, well, hey, you should be seeing the photo now. So this is the image I got from Doriana. And she said, hi, I've been snapping away trying to get a good image. I've taken a break, but I'm now back to learning the camera settings, ISO, aperture, speed. This is not the prettiest picture, just working on setting the ISO, aperture and exposure correctly. I was looking to see if the exposure was correct with the settings. So any composition critique would be helpful. So the settings are ISO 100, f22 and 1/60th of a second. So just a wee thing on the idea of the settings first of all. ISO 100, that's great. That gives you a nice clean image, about as clean as it can get, so that you've got more flexibility for being able to edit it without before it starts getting too noisy or pixelated. 1/60th of a second is quite slow if you're hand holding it. If you're hand holding 1/60th of a second, you run the risk of the idea of it going slightly out of focus just because of hand wobble. So if you're on a tripod or beanbag or resting the camera even on a couple of books or something, then that's fine. But if you're hand holding it, I would suggest, generally speaking, try to look to about 100th of a second or above if you can. And you would have the flexibility for this because at f22 is a very, very narrow aperture. And that gives you a big depth of focus that on an image like this, you probably don't need. You could quite easily have got away with something like an f11, I think, and it would have still been in focus front to back. But that would have given you more options then with your shutter speed. You could have had a slightly faster shutter speed. So I hope that makes sense in terms of the technicals. Looking at a flower here, is this some kind of orchid, I guess? Now, the image you've sent me is, you put it up on Facebook, but it's very, very low resolution. So it's not taking up much of the screen here. And if I zoom in to fill the screen, it's already starting to get a bit pixelated here. So that makes it slightly more difficult for me to know necessarily how well the detail has come out. It looks reasonably detailed, but one of the things I was very struck with by this is the blue in this. So this orchid, the colour just doesn't quite look natural. So I was kind of wondering about that. So what I did here, if I go Control J here, I'm just duplicating the layer in Photoshop, and then I do auto color and auto. So I'm going to where are we? Yeah, auto color, and was it auto tone? Ah, there we go. Auto tone. Suddenly it's white. And the fact that by going to auto tone and auto color and what have you, suddenly it becomes white, I'm guessing that this was a picture of a white flower, not a picture of a blue flower. And suddenly it brightens up a lot more. So this suggests to me that your white balance setting on your camera wasn't quite right. Now, I don't know what your white balance setting was, but generally speaking, when you've in your camera, most of the times you just want to set it to auto, and in most cases the auto will tend to give you the best kind of white balance. Sometimes it doesn't, at which point you may need to adjust it in post-production. So another option here, that was me just doing that. If I duplicate that layer again, go into Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and under Color here I do Auto. It also shifts it to make it white. If I wanted to do it manually, so I go back to As Shot, this is quite blue, so I could move this into the, and as you see, I move this across the yellow here until it becomes white, and then it becomes too yellow. So I'm kind of judging slightly there. There's also a very slight purple shift. Maybe if I nudge it into the green a little bit, or maybe back into, yeah, you're kind of moving around, just trying to find that little point whereby it becomes white again. But actually, again, most software, you hit auto and it's kind of got it there for you. So either way, then you are really is about getting a white flower. So if your auto white balance in the camera is making it shift towards the yellow, the green, the purple, or the blue, then in Photoshop, but also in a lot of editing software, you'll find there's a white balance sliders where you can move the temperature between the yellow and the blue and between the purple and the green. And there's usually an auto button which might fix it for you. Doesn't always though, in which case you can go in and manually move the sliders around until you find the level you want. So when we come back here then, I think we've got a much brighter flower. It's much more vibrant than your original kind of blue shifted one. As for other bits of composition, it's kind of, well, this is sort of interesting side on. Flowers quite often you're looking kind of face on, lots of petals around. This could be interesting if you went macro. Now you don't have enough detail in this version that you've sent to me, so when I come into this close it's very, very pixelated. But something like this could really withstand, could be a really interesting kind of macro shot. Get in, find those details, go into the almost abstract levels at it. The other thing really is, what else are you wanting to do? Is this looking like it's sort of a bit like a kind of pancake, sort of like sat and then kind of spread out a bit. And so changing and playing around with the angles, going straight on, doing the macro, or even if you wanted to, we've talked before about this idea that actually if that sometimes the background is either not enough or too much. But if you do something like that, that becomes kind of interesting as well. I mean, slight overlap. If I just, where are we? On there. Change that to black. Just where it's, just kind of gently tidy up the corners, something like that, or darken down. Then you've got space for, well, if you were doing a poster or something, you'd have space for writing in something like that. But also sometimes it's just that notion of, you sometimes draw more attention to the idea of something that's bright by having, something dark around, much larger kind of darker space. And then it feels like you're almost making some kind of statement. You're really drawing your eye to that part. In this case, I'm not totally sure, but it's just going back to that idea of, very often images are improved by zooming in or by pulling out further. And I think it's worth trying with that, Doriana. Give yourself options and things to play with. So hopefully that gives you a couple of ideas there. Like I say, basically, in terms of your aperture, you had a very narrow aperture. You probably didn't need as narrow as that. If you come back to something like an f8 or an f11, would have given you more options with your shutter speed. And of course the main thing there as well being your white balance. As for composition, play around, always look around with, get in close, pull out wide, look from above, play with the compositions, and sooner or later something's but likely to grab your eye. And ultimately with all of these things, when we're taking photos, we're looking for the bit that's going to make us go, ooh. There's always an exciting bit where you go, oh, that's interesting. You end up taking a few more photos from that angle. So never feel like you're just restricted to the one. But I hope that gives you a few thoughts and ideas. But thank you for sending that one in, Doriana. Couple more comments here. Oh, Meg's joined us and said hi to everyone. Yes, Doriana said it is a white orchid. Sandra likes the composition of it. April says, I like the finished product after the colour balance is fixed. Susan says, I love the idea of the two orchids back to back. And April says it looks quite an abstract picture. And Doriana says, I believe I used the flash for white balance. Yeah, the flash is quite often, if your white balance is set for neutral, or even more so if you're in you're indoors and you've got a slightly yellowish tint, so maybe you've got your yellow lights indoors at daytime or nighttime or something like that, where there's a yellow kind of thing, and the flash kind of will go overcompensate, and the camera will be offsetting the yellow of the room by giving it a blue shift into the auto white balance. And then when the flash goes off, which is a more neutral kind of white balance, it tends to make everything look much bluer than it would have been. So yeah, sometimes you've kind of got to work out your white balance before, but actually in the end, you take a photo, you look in the back of the camera, and if something looks blue, or yellow, too blue, too yellow, then just go in and maybe play with the white balance settings. Right, okay, thank you for that. Quick little reminder, if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then, which way do I look now? That way, yes. buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. And also the other thing here is, so this is a feedback session. I've only had 2 people send in for feedback. But it's a real opportunity here for you to send me your images. There are very few places on the internet where we can get genuine one-to-one feedback on our images. This is one of them. So if you're really wanting to improve your photography, to challenge, to get past the bits, your sticking points, and everybody has sticking points. Don't be embarrassed by this. I was chatting with my wife Maggie this morning about one of the great things I love about photography is that there seems to be no end to mastery. That no matter how good I get, there's always more things to learn. There's always places where I haven't got there yet. There's always people in particular areas who can do better than I can, and I haven't learned that yet. How am I going to get to the next stage? Part of it's by practice, part of it's by learning, but sometimes we get stuck and we're not sure. Being able to get direct feedback from somebody else is one of the best ways to advance your photography. So make the most of this section here and make sure to send me your images for feedback. Right. So what I'm going to move on to now is Sandra. And now Sandra's was really interesting. She said there was a competition recently on PhotoCrowd for car radiator grills. And it made me think about the challenges of car photography, as there are usually people looking at classic cars and unwanted objects in the background. This made me think about possible solutions. Photograph an abstract of the car or mask the background of the car in some way to exclude the distractions. If you have any other solutions, it would be great to hear them. I attach a number of cars, photos of cars with people. Feel free to use as many or few as you like. I will also send you another email with some of my car abstracts, which I don't think were very good, but I'm not quite sure why they don't work as photos. So, really interesting then, this idea of car photography, and that sometimes there are car shows, or sometimes you're in a car park and there's some fancy classic car or something that really grabs your attention. You whip out your phone or you have your camera with you. You want to take a decent photo of it, but there's distractions. There's other cars parked nearby. There's other people moving around. There's people looking at it. What do you do? What kind of things are you up against? And I think Sandra's immediate, her kind of two first ideas, which is one is kind of masking off the background to get rid of the distractions, is certainly one way of doing it, and the other way, which was to go in and create details, is certainly something to do. So let me show you a couple of photos. So I'll show. Okay, let's show this one first. Then I'll show you a couple that Sandra sent in. So this being a kind of a wonderful example. You know, what a fantastic looking car. This old police car, doesn't it just look superb? And you think, yes, I want a photograph of that. But we also have this marketplace behind it. We have these people here, this woman out with her phone trying to take a photo of it. And so we can get a picture of the car, but we're not necessarily getting an isolated picture of a car. Another example here, there's really cool looking, I think it's a Lotus, is it? But again, we've got bloke standing here. Another fantastic Chevy here, guy with motorbiker just looking on the inside. A couple of kids standing there playing, blokes in there. We've got this problem all the time with backgrounds getting in the way. And Sandra, the photos then that Sandra sent me as examples of where she tried to get past that was to go for the detail. And this is a really good idea, which is, so she zoomed in on the badge, in this case of that wonderful old police car. And this one, in the case of this one, again, we've got all these lovely old badges on the front of this. We're talking these radiator grille type things. This one going for, yes, it is a Lotus. And we've got a petrol cap. And she's gone for kind of abstract lines with this, and these are good ways of going about things. As for these ones, and you're not sure quite why they don't work so well, what I would say with this is, when you are going for this kind of the classic radiator grille type shot, then symmetry becomes absolutely everything. You have to get your camera completely and utterly lined up, and in this case it isn't. If I just open this in Photoshop and just show, I'll just close that one by Doriana there, and if we look here, you see these little front bits are moving off to one side. It's not quite there. And then if we look up here, this bit of the shoulder here is slightly higher than that bit of the shoulder. If I grab a line and pull it down here, I don't know whether you can see that, this one sits lower than that. If I grab a line here and put it through the middle of the badge, then these bits down the side here don't quite line up. And Now you can start, if you want, we can duplicate that layer. I can Control T, I can start trying to kind of drag that bit down there, drag this bit across here, and really start sort of playing around, trying to straighten it out until we kind of end up with maybe something like that. I'll then just have to kind of crop the top and bottom a bit, and that kind of works slightly better. We've now we've managed to line up the center with the center, and we've lined up we've leveled it. But it's I think there's kind of these bottom lines are maybe a bit too heavy. I think part of the interest is this bit. So didn't mean to do that. Undo, and perhaps you don't need as much of that. You would do something like that. But we also have a slight problem with the fact that in the background over here, the top of that shop board or whatever is very pale, which the white part of here is running into. It's a difficult one where the background is sort of interfering, even though you've got the close-up. I think similarly, if I just close that a moment and we pull this one in, again, it's not quite lined up. This is just sort of very slightly tilted, very slightly off kilter. If you look at the bottom, the bumper here, it's running up. And I think this is one of those things that you've just got to be really careful of, that when you've got your camera, you've got to get your camera dead center. And the other thing is if you're using your phone, no, I don't have my phone immediately to hand. I'm not quite sure what I did with it. Anyway, but you also have to bear in mind that when you turn your phone to look here, very often the camera is down in one corner. So we are looking through at the middle of the screen, but the camera is off to one side. So if you're wanting to line up in the smack bang middle of the radiator grille, then you actually have to shift your camera over and line up the lens bit with the middle of the car to give you that proper symmetry. And it's worth remembering. I mean, I know I've been caught out myself with this. I had to play with it. I mean, I'll show you an example. There was, I mean, recently, just up the road, beautiful Morgan car. So took this shot of it, smack bang on the side. But again, it took me a while to realise that it wasn't quite lined the way that I wanted, and that actually I had to. The middle here, which is essentially this bit of the door where the door hinges are, I had to shift my phone over slightly to get it right. And then similarly, when I did a front grille shot like this, if I'm standing holding the camera, but holding my phone, so my phone is lined up in the middle, but the lens is slightly off to one side, then the whole thing shifts out of balance slightly. So I have to shift the phone over, and it's a very small thing, and it's very, very easy to get caught out on. So particularly if you're using a phone camera, then make sure that you're lining the lens up with the middle of the radiator grille or the car or whatever it is you're doing, and not just lining the phone up with the middle of it. So I hope that makes sense. Couple of other things about taking photos of these cars then. There's a few different options to think of, and one of the things is, well, okay, I've scribbled down a bunch of notes here, but I think first of all is the camera angle. Is now you can see that both with this one and with the prior one, I'm not at head height. I've squatted down so that I am at car height, and I think that's quite an important one. That very often with cars, you either need to be sort of down at car level, slightly below, or quite a bit above, like almost like an aerial view coming down. The worst angle is basically eye height. Now I do have a photo which, where are we? Close that one. Yep, this one, which was taken more or less at eye height, and this one always does quite well in the kind of car, front of car, classic car type things. It never wins, but it's quite often in the top 10 to 20%. Although the thing is I don't really like it that much as a photo, because this was taken back in 2005. This was taken before really learnt anything much about photography, and this was taken at pretty much the height I'm standing at. It looks slightly higher than that because the road is sloping down, so I've actually got the slope of the road on my side. The reason this one always does particularly well, I think, is because it's James Bond's car. It's, you know, it's a DB5 or DB4. And so it's a very classic Aston Martin shape, and so everybody loves a classic. And the thing is it does well in kind of crowd vote, but in terms of expert vote or expert judging, never does as well. Whereas if I take something in a kind of classic car sense, we go for an old Volkswagen Beetle, this one tends to do much better. Same angle, essentially that 45 degrees from one corner, but being lower down, being at the height of the headlight, it actually just makes it look so much more dramatic. And as a photo, I prefer this as a photo. And we've got all the lovely old rust spots and everything else on it, and the autumn trees. But regardless of the background, I just think it works better than that as an angle. And if that ended up parked outside my house now, I would photograph it in a very different way. And I probably even, I would do a side on, and I would do a front grille. That's another front grille, a lovely old beautiful Jaguar XK140. That was parked down the street. Black and white version, colour version. Again, always worth playing around with that, because sometimes the black and white can remove distractions and allow you to darken down edges a bit more. This was it from the side, or from that 45-degree angle again, where I'm getting down to close to, well, it's kind of bonnet height, really, or hood height, as you say, on the other side of the Atlantic. And it gives you that lovely kind of sense of the flow of the car. So the first thing to consider then is that notion of the height that you're at, and the angle. Are you going, if essentially your three places to shoot from are either this angle where you're kind of 45 degrees onto the front wing, or sometimes the back wing, or you're directly side on like that Morgan, or you're directly on the front of the grille. And if you've got the chance, do all three. Also, try raising up and down a little bit, play around with these angles, because certain cars, depending on the position of their headlights and everything else, some of them work better if you're slightly under, looking up, can create a much more dramatic kind of shot. So what do you do then if you are at a place? Okay, let's go back to Sandra's cars here. So you've got this kind of stuff where you've got these beautiful classic cars, but you're full of, you know, there's people around, or maybe you're at a car show where there's, you know, lots of things going on, but there's people looking around, poking their head around, and that kind of thing. What options have you got? Well, first of all, if you are going specifically to a car show and you are making a point of this rather than just randomly stumbling across something, arrive early, leave late. You know, that's a kind of a classic, because the earlier you get there, or the later you are at the end of it, the less people are going to be around. So you're more likely to be able to get a place where you can get a shot of people not being around. The other thing is, of course, patience. You know, that people are going to be coming and going all the time. So sometimes it is, you really got to, you're hanging around for 5 minutes, you might be hanging around for 20 minutes, just waiting for that moment where there's a bit of a clearing around the car. That gives you space to do. I mean, the problem is we have, for the idea of masking, now sometimes a mask can work with a particular kind of car. I mean, if I go back to, it's okay, let's flip back into Photoshop for a moment. And if I grab this car and I take the selection tool, it's not too bad. I can this is kind of doing a reasonable job of the selection, because the background isn't too cluttered, isn't too different. So having selected the background relatively easily, and there will be, of course, you know, bits, I mean, it's selected under the wheels here. So if I just do an Alt and try and take that out, having selected that now, I can, if I want, I can select the inverse of this, and at that point, if I wanted to stop the background looking quite as interfering, I've got a number of options. I might do a hue saturation where I kind of desaturate the background. Now that's just creating spot color, which I'm never quite so keen on, but maybe I just bring the colors up a bit. But I've kind of dulled them down a bit so that the blue of the sky or whatever isn't quite interfering with the blue of the car so much. What I might also do is I might take the curves and I'm just going to attach that so it only attaches the layer below, and darken down the background, lighten up the background. You can see that it kind of stands out a bit more. But if I kind of do something like that, so it's allowing the car to stand out a bit more depending on which way round you want to go. Now obviously that's at kind of cartoon levels, but that kind of darkened it a bit more to allow this to stand out is maybe one of the ways you can do it. Problem, actually I've realised that, so we have to go back in here and actually just paint that wheel back in, otherwise it's getting lost in there. So that kind of works with that. However, when you've got something which is as busy as this, then this just doesn't, it's just about, I won't even try and show you, but there are so many things. The auto select bits don't work. It's fine along something as clear as where you've got a nice clean barrier between the pavement and here, but it doesn't know how to separate out the shoulder of the car from the little girl, for the what's going on in the window, this little red bit that's running in the background here from the top of the roof, the t-shirt on the guy here, and it just ends up being an absolute nightmare. So if you want to completely mask it out, you are really going to be going pixel by pixel in order to do it. So what do you do in situations like this? So we talked about the idea of camera angles. There is this notion then, if there's too many people about, zero in on the detail, which is like, so you zero in on the grille, you zero in on the badge. You make a point of, this is the bit you're trying to do. Or sometimes what you can do is you can get interior shots, and I think you were doing that with, well, with this one you were going for there's the cap here, but actually, sorry, let's just stretch that out a bit, fill that up a bit more. You've also got, there's a steering wheel in there. Sometimes you can kind of get some really interesting shots of steering wheels, gear sticks. Some of these big fancy cars or old classic cars have lovely leather interiors. So there's options that you can go for that. So that notion of detail, or going almost, or playing around with the front grille so it becomes almost abstract again, gives you ideas there. Another option as well is to go for a shallow depth of focus, shallow depth of field. Now, it won't always work in something like this, but if you've got a very, very wide aperture and you're kind of standing back and zoomed in a bit, then that will help to blur the background more and maybe help the car stand out a little bit more. Now, again, it's going to depend where other people happen to be positioned, but that's, your blurring is an option. Now, there is one really cool trick you can do if you have a tripod and you have an ND filter. Remember last week we were talking about was it last week or the week before, I think, long exposure, where what you do is you have an ND filter cap here. So this one is a really strong one, which gives you the equivalent of 10 stops down. So the light here, I put that across there, you can see it's acting like really, really super strong sunglasses. What this means is that even in daylight, you might be able to do a really long shutter speed. And if you do a really long shutter speed, if you were to manage to get something like 30 seconds, so you go down to as small an aperture as you can, so you do something like f22, you get 100 ISO, and then you have one of these on your lens, and you stick it on a tripod and you try and go for 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, something like that. Then in the intervening half to 1 minute, the people that are moving around it will just become blurs. And at that point, some of them may even kind of blur themselves out of the picture altogether. They might leave no mark. There will be some people who, in this case, the people sitting at the back are probably still going to be sitting at the back, and you might not be able to do a lot about that. But depending on where this is situated, all these people that are walking past will blur out. The woman here who's taking a photo of it, she's probably not spending more than about 20 seconds with her phone. So fairly quickly, if you've got a minute thing, there's 40 seconds where she's not there, so the amount that she will appear on the screen will be very slight, and you can get some really cool kind of ghostly figures moving around at that point. So for me, that I think is one of those kind of really cool tricks if you can do it. Get yourself an ND filter, a tripod, and try and go for it. And better on a dull day. On a sunny day, you're going to really struggle because there's going to be so much sunlight. But certainly on a dull day like this, that could really be an answer for you. What else? What other notes did I make for myself here? Sometimes you can make a feature out of the people, so actually it becomes partly about the car, but it's more like kind of street photography or documentary photography, where what you're doing is there's partly about the car, but actually you make a feature of zooming in on the person who's taking a photo of the car, or somebody who happens to be peering through the window looking really interested. I think there was one of yours, which one was it? Yeah, like this one here. I mean, I think this bloke here looking in through the window, there's something interesting in that. And so you would actually, you kind of make a feature of that. So maybe this isn't the exact example, isn't going to work totally with this, but you can see how you're kind of getting close to it. So that notion of you feature the people. And then finally, what I would also say is, if you've got the chance, if you're at a car show or you happen to, or there's an option, talk to the car owner. And obviously this depends on your personality type, whether you feel up for it or what the options are. But anybody who's got a classic car and they like taking it along to car shows or places where they can show it off, likes to show it off. They like to see good photos of their car. Now, it might be that you can talk to them a little bit, and maybe either at the end of the show, when most people have gone home, if they're hanging around and you can hang around, they won't mind shifting the car just around the corner a bit, or just into a slight little area nearby where there aren't the distractions, or there's maybe a more interesting kind of background. Or possibly you can exchange details, and if they don't live too far away, you can arrange to go and photograph that car as well at a later date. And if you can kind of convince them that you can do a reasonable job, and that you've got a reasonable rapport with them, then actually quite a lot of these classic car owners will be open to that idea of allowing you to take some really cool photos of their car in exchange for the photos. So there's a lot of different options there to play with. So yes, masking off in Photoshop you can do, but very often it's really quite difficult. And certainly zooming in and getting details is one of the ways you can do it. But these ideas of make a feature out of the people, or put it on really slow shutter speed and make a feature out of the movement and the ghostly blurs around, is another way of doing it, as well as playing with shallow depth of focus to try and blur out people a little bit more, talking to the owner. So I hope that gives you some ideas, Sandra. Lots of thoughts and possibilities within that. Couple of comments here. Oh yeah, Sandra says yes, it was a Lotus. VG's joined us, says that's a good tip. Can't remember which one now. Sandra says good point on symmetry. I will definitely pay more attention to that when I go to photograph cars in future. Yeah, like I said, yes, maybe it's about the notion of the holding your phone camera at exactly the right point. VG says lovely cars, everyone vintage, I guess. Doriana also says lovely cars, and Sandra says I like the idea of the HD filter, as that wasn't something I thought of doing, but will give that a try in the future. Well, let me know how that goes. It's one I haven't tried it out myself, but I keep thinking I need to go and try it out myself. Once I kind of properly get past this this sciatica and I can really kind of move a bit, I think next time there is some kind of classic car gathering or whatever, I may well take the camera along, take the filter, take a tripod, and certainly give it a go. So that pretty much brings us to the end of this podcast. However, don't run away just yet, because I'm going to set a challenge. I'm setting a challenge for next week. A Halloween special. Yes, I know I should have said it last week. I'm going on the idea that whilst I know quite a lot of Halloween stuff went on last night because it was Saturday, Halloween itself is still 1 or 2 days away. So there might still be stuff going about. It was Meg. You can blame Meg or praise Meg, depending on how you're feeling about it. She reminded me of this last night. She said, were we going to do a Halloween challenge? And of course, we did a Halloween challenge last year. Oh, what's happened here? I've got a... Why is that said? It's right. Okay, I'm not sure. This looks like it's ended here. I don't know. Oh, going to try refreshing. Is this going to work? Hopefully this is working. Right, I don't know. Had something here where it all went off at my end. So hopefully I'm back with you. Oh, are you still there? Am I still there? Oh, Doriana says still on. Good. Okay. Major panic. Right at the end here. So, Halloween challenge. Yes, we've done a Halloween challenge for the last couple of years. Just a little bit of fun. So, given the fact that, yes, Halloween is still a couple of nights away, well, or Halloween, Day of the Dead, or actually even if you're, VG in India, if you've got any local festivals you want to throw in, or you want to do something with a pumpkin or a vampire or a black cat or a spider's web, whether you want to go abstract, whether you want to go in zero in, macro, do little details on a piece of carved pumpkin, whether you want to create a still life out of something. I know for a lot of you in North America, in Canada, there's and the US, there's you tend to have these kind of big people that you'll have neighbours who do these big yards full of amazing decorations, Halloween decorations. So play around with that as well. So there's lots of options here. Put your photos into either the Facebook group, the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group, or or you can email them to me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. But send me your images. Try and get them into me by Friday if you can, so that I have time to go through and organise them ready for Sunday's podcast. So that's next Sunday then, the Halloween challenge. And there's lots of options. Stick your photos in and we'll have a bit of fun. We'll just enjoy looking at each other's photos and see if we can inspire each other to try something out. So remember, you have options for still life, you have options for documentary, for going out on the towns, taking photos of people all dressed up, macro, street, landscape, there's all sorts of options. VG said audio not there. Is that only... oh no, she's got it. Okay, right. Right, Pat says Woody has a little friend. Right, yes, there's a little figure my grandson gave me. So, yes, that's it. I can see... Now it looks like it's all pausing again. I don't know whether we're ever going to get to the end of this or whether it's going to let me. Could be moving. Bit of a technical nightmare. Thank you to everybody for just sticking with me on this one. It's felt a bit of a trial in some ways. Make sure you send me your Halloween images or Halloween themed images or Day of the Dead images or something similar ready for next week. Thank you to Doriana. Thank you to Sandra for sending in the images. And I look forward to seeing you all next Sunday. Take care. Bye-bye. Nope, not that one. I need to do that.